Yeah, so before we start with the event, I would just very briefly take a few seconds to talk about the Digital Euro Association, because just really quick, because as I said, we have lost some time in the beginning. So just to introduce myself, I'm Jonas. I'm a founding member of the Digital Euro Association. And we basically established this think tank, yeah, I mean, almost a few months ago, I think like 9 or 10 months ago. And it's basically to the mission to establish a think tank around the digitalization of money. So for us, we basically address topics as crypto assets, stable coins, also CBDCs, also other innovative forms of digital money as tokenized e-money or tokenized commercial bank money. And our mission is really to contribute to the public and political discourse through research, education, and by providing a platform. So for us, it's basically about educating. This is also what we have or what we will do today. It's also about building a community. This is also what we do today, because we are very happy to have Sylvia and Rita share their content with our community. This is really great, also to foster collaborations in the end. And this is like the 3 pillars the Digital Euro Association builds on. This initiative has been started by 7 founding members. Some of you might maybe know Professor Philipp Sande, head of the Frankfurt School Blockchain Center, or Alexander Bechtel, who works for the Deutsche Bank on their CBDC and digital assets topics. We are also quite thrilled to have already onboarded around 180 research fellows. So we really have lots of manpower now when it comes to research and expertise in this field, where we are really happy to have. And it's also for a few months or few weeks also possible now for companies to basically participate in the Digital Euro Association. So basically, this is what you see on this slide. If you as a company want to participate in our initiative, you can just scan the QR code at the bottom and become a partner and also reach out to us. Or if you as an individual want to basically be up to date about the Digital Euro Association, you can subscribe to our newsletter, which is the second QR code. Or you could also become a DI expert if you have a track record around digital money. So this basically applies for people really working in this digital money field, and also maybe doing research or also having practical projects, as for example, the one we are basically addressing today. Right, so this just as a very quick introduction. And yeah, as I said, I'm sorry, of course, in the beginning again for these difficulties on our end. Nevertheless, we are really thrilled to have today an event which is of very high importance for us, because we kick off a series about the private sector and the digital euro. Because this is for sure a topic where not just the public sector in the forms of central banks and also governments basically have to put their efforts into this, but also the private sector has a really good chance to contribute, and also to contribute to the success of all these digital euro projects in the end. Therefore, this will be today the kickoff of a series where we have basically for the next few months, every 2 months, basically a webinar with private sector institutions around the digital euro. So today we start with basically with insights from Italy. So we're really thrilled to talk about the Spunta project by the Italian Banking Association, which is, from my perspective, really remarkable because it has brought lots of banks together on a DLT framework. It's really live, so it's not just PowerPoint, it's really operating. So I'm really impressed. And also the digital euro basically, it is currently experimented about the digital euro within the system. But I mean, we have 2 great guests with us today, so they know way better about the project than myself. So I'm very happy to introduce you to Silvia Attanasio, who is head of innovation at the Italian Banking Association, and also Rita Camporeale, who's head of payment systems at the Italian Banking Association. So thanks again, Silvia and Rita, for joining us. I'm really looking forward to your presentation. So I will basically now give the stage to you. And whenever also the audience has questions, please put them into the chat. We will answer them after the approximately 30-minute presentation.
Thank you so much, Jonas. Thank you for inviting us and for us to share our experience. I start sharing the screen. Our presentation would be basically divided in three parts, where the Italian banks started working on DLT. I mean the Spunta project, and a very short description of this first part of work. Then we come into the position of Italian banks, and the answer we provided to the public consultation started from the ECB. And finally, we will conclude with the activities we are conducting, experimenting around the idea and the concept of a digital euro. So the Spunta project started with a double perspective. We started in 1917, in 2017. I'm becoming older and older. No, in 2017, with the idea of verifying and trying to understand on a practical way if it was true that every promises that has been made around the distributed ledger technology were applicable to a banking system. So we started with the idea to experiment and use an innovative technology, trying to understand the shift in the paradigm that is implied by this technology. And at the same time, we create an infrastructure able to support and able to host several initiatives. So the goal was to have a common track network, let me say, where several initiatives were be able to travel, even in competition among them. So we started designing this infrastructure in parallel with the application layer, which was strictly related to the Spunta process. And the idea has been both of matching the needs of the bank themselves and to at the same time to dialogue with the authorities, and especially with the Bank of Italy, that has been during all the project open to our questions and to our doubts and difficulties, because I can say that one of the first projects aiming to go into production with an entire process redesign using DLT has been quite difficult, and we had to be able to fail fast, let me say. Just a quick introduction to the Spunta process, which is an interbank reconciliation process. So it is related to matching correspondent, or let me say bilateral accounts that are co-owned by two different banks. And the main limit of this process, the main problem of this process was that the reconciliation procedure is related to the exchange of data set from the two banks, and the ownership of the account switches from one bank to another every almost 2 or 3 years. And as long as I am the owner of the bilateral account, I can see all the information related to this account, the balance, the movements, etc. And I'm also responsible to conduct the investigation for every mismatch. When the ownership switches to the other bank, I stop see everything. So if I need, for example, for the quarterly report that has to be produced every 3 months, I need to call or to send an email to my counterparties to ask the balance of my bilateral accounts. So this has been changed, of course, thanks to the DLT. And here you can see the main pros and cons when we decided to start with the Spunta process as the first implementation of DLT. One of the strengths has been that Spunta is a very small process, it's an internal process. Sometimes we call it a Cinderella in the bank's back offices. It doesn't involve final customers. This is a good point, because banks has been safe in experimenting such an immature technology, especially at that time, without the risk to impact in any way the final customers. It is a sort of baseline for, or it is the endpoint of a lot of other process. So it is possible to understand, working on this process, additional use cases that can be devised for the future. it is also a sort of natural sandbox, because the Italian Banking Association is the issuer of the self-regulatory agreement that rules the Spunta. So at the end of the project phase of the work, we've been able to update together with the banks and to the governance of the ABI itself, to define the new text of the agreement and to issue it. So defining and pushing the red button to transform a very old style process based on tapes in the agreement to a DLT based one. And the last point is that since Spunta was a simple process, quite simple, but in the beginning we were sure it was simpler, the pilot activities were completed swiftly and quite quickly. So we moved into the pre-production stage quite quickly. Of course, to work on a small process is at the same time a cons for the project, because it has been not easy to see and to quantify the benefits in terms of business. And in some way, it is quite pervasive from an IT point of view. So some optimization and the standardization of the dataset required to go deep in a lot of silos, often COBOL-based system into the IT of a bank. So here you can see the journey of a 2-year project. Of course, the timeline is affected from the stage and the maturity of DLT at that time. When we decided, for example, to use Corda, it was at his 0.9 version. So it was, we needed to work on performance, on tuning of the application, on optimization of the especially when we came to scalability issues. But some figures on where we are now. Now we have 98 banks in production, and this is very important from my perspective, not only because of the number, but because this means that we involve from very big banks, we can say European champions, to very, very small banks. So DLT with the Spunta project became a matter not only for giants, but also for smaller banks. We processed 332 million transactions in the last year, and the 98% of those movements has been automatically matched. Now we have in place around 600 bilateral accounts, and every day 600 operator of the 98 banks use the DLT application to work on their process. So it is their daily application. The banks switched off their previous process systems for this process. The main benefits the bank found in this project is the first one about transparency. They now have the full visibility of all the information related to the account, Nostro and Vostro. The automatic match rate has increased, and the communication channel has been integrated in the application. So even the investigation phase is based on DLT transaction. Now I want to give the floor to Rita to move to our position on the digital euro. Rita, I can't hear you.
Rita. Me neither.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So thank you to the organizers for inviting us to present our experience and position. You have just listened to what we, as Italian Banking Association, have been doing. Let's put that in the wider context. What's happening in the same, more or less in the same period, when the ECB started reflecting, as many other central banks have been doing, and also the private sector has been doing, on the possibility to issue digital forms of money. And the first time we learn officially that the ECB is exploring the possibility of issuing a digital euro was a speech by Mr. Mersch in May 2020. And Mr. Mersch concluded that, of course, there was a lot to understand and to study about the digital euro. But if and when the time comes, we want to be ready, and let me ensure you, we will be ready. Even though the central banks say that there's not a business case for a central bank digital currency issuance, still they want to be ready. From the latest, as you may very well know, from the latest survey of the BIS, we learned that 86% of the central banks in the world are exploring digital currencies. We also know all the discussion and experimentations about stable coins. So definitely the acceleration in this process is continuing. So at the same time, and just after the statement by Mr. Mersch, based on the experience we have been gathering thanks to the Spunta project that Silvia explained, the banks in Italy agreed to set up an expert group to explore digital money and crypto assets. And 10 principles were approved already in June last year that, of course, were then developed when we answered to the consultation of the European Central Bank on the report for a digital euro. And as you very well know, the report was published in October 2020. It was open for public consultation until January. And a few days ago, the central bank, the ECB, published a report on the consultation itself, which, of course, gives us an overview of the main concerns and interests of both citizens and professional respondents to the about digital euro. I don't go through the whole report nor our response, but just to say what are the key pillars that represent ABI's position and where we continue our work on. The first assumption is that the digital euro must be functionally different from an electronic payment instrument with different features to enable specific use cases. We don't see a digital euro like an instant payment because we already have that, and probably we don't need a digital euro just to pay in a supermarket with our mobile phone. So this, of course, is also a matter and follows the consideration that not only our association, but many respondents made in their answers to the consultation, that digital euro should not disintermediate nor jeopardize the role of the banks in the economic infrastructure of our world. So in terms, of course, of monetary policy and financial stability, the issuance of CBDCs should not change the amount of money supply and would, of course, would need to be considered in full as a part of, a third kind of central bank money, like bank reserves, banknotes, and coins. And indeed, the central banks, the European Central Bank, said that the CBDC would be aside banknote and coins and not replace them. The second pillar of our response is that we think that a DLT-based digital euro would be a quantum leap in technology and allow something which is not achievable today in a simple manner. We have here a typical example of what we mean by that, that DLT would allow a simplification of processes, for example, of a number of bonuses that are being deployed by governments, especially after the pandemic. And on the basis of programmability, we would have much simpler and straightforward ways of exchanging transactions and complex process ways of executing and discharging obligations between different economic agents. And this would, of course, be applicable also in a tiered system whereby the central bank issues the digital euro, but banks distribute it. And while they distribute it, they also offer value-added services to their customers. And the third pillar we have for our in our response is that the citizens must be aware of what they are paying with. So they should perceive the difference between a digital euro and commercial bank money, which they use for paying today. So clearly, digital euro is just like today's euro in a digitalized form, of course, but the citizen should really understand what happens. And this could be possible even when integrating digital euro in the front end of that would be offered by the banks. So basically, these are the three pillars around which we built our response to the ECB consultation. But we also offer our, we are fully available to further discuss with the ECB, and in fact, we had some follow-up with them, but also available for experimenting with them. And in view of that very important phase that possibly will start after a first decision, a first go-no-go decision by the Governing Council in June this year, we have been preparing for that. And I turn back to Silvia to explain what we are doing.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, this is our vision. So we are quite optimistic and think that the digital euro is coming. So we believe that it would be important even more in relation to such a great innovation, to be ready and to really understand the impact of this kind of transformation in the real life every day. This is the reason why we started a first, let me say, quite small experimentation around the idea of digital euro, because as Mr. Mersch said, for the ECB, Italian banks want to be ready too if and when the digital euro will come. So we started an experimentation together with 18 Italian banks that is divided into work stream. The first pillar, the first work stream is related to the infrastructure and the distributed model. And the second pillar is related to programmability. In the first pillar, we go back to our idea of the train track. So we think to an infrastructure that could be reused for different use cases and that has a series of key components that can be reused in the context of an experimentation phase if the ECB will decide for it. So we are working and we are completing an analysis document that describe and try to understand the different components that have built for the Spunta project and in which way they can be usefully considered as a reference or as a concrete tool that can be reused in a context of a digital euro. The second pillar is related to programmability. As Rita said, one of our refrain in the experimentation was that we don't need a digital euro to pay a coffee with a smartphone. We already are able to do this. We want to understand so in which way a digital euro can transform our daily experience as citizens. So we started to define a set of ideas, and we found also 4 partners that support the develop of 4 demos. And together and working really strictly with the 18 banks and with the different function and different skills within each of these 18 banks, both from innovation, credits, payments department, to understand in which way those demo can be leveraged on a programmable digital euro. So let me go through the 4 use cases very briefly. The first one is called Safe Return. It has developed with the contribution of Fabric. It is a process of returning a purchase made through an e-commerce in a safe way. This use case want to power different, maybe small e-commerce in Europe-based, thanks to the trust that is related to the process of return. So we implemented a series of instructors that consent to make the process of returning purchased goods more reliable and consumer friendly, leveraging on an escrow account managed by a bank. So at the time of the delivery of the returned goods by the client, the sum of money is blocked in the escrow account, and the sum can only be released to the customer or to the seller when the decision about the return has made. The second use case is called Pay and Split. It has been developed by PwC and is related to the concept and to the functionality of split transaction. I mean, atomic and instantaneous transactions. So we applied this concept to the idea of the so-called short supply chains that can use this functionality. So a series of products, of 0 kilometer products, can be bundled into a single in a composed process. Product that can be sold with a single transaction that is divided to direct the payment to the seller of the product and to the various producers making up the supply chain. The third use case has been developed by Entity Data and is called Culture Pass. It is basically the use case that Rita described about the government bonus for the Culture Pass. One interesting is that in this case, we can see that a government bonus basically become a smart contract, a simple smart contract. So in Italy, for example, we have this bonus for a teenager turning 18 and they can buy books with this bonus. And then we have another bonus, a similar one, to be honest, which is dedicated to teachers. And they can use this bonus to buy, again, books So bookshops are involved in both these bonuses, but the bonuses are issued by two different ministers. So the bookshops needs to apply to both ministers, needs to require to both ministers for the bonus to be transformed in liquidity. In this case, we have no process to be registered as an eligible bookshop for those bonuses. And also from the public point of view, they just need to develop another smart contract. So we developed this also for a mobility bonus that we see in France and in Ireland also, and in Italy too, of course. Another application of the same concept related to the limit of spendability of money has been applied also to pocket money, so the money that can be given to minors. The fourth use case, the last one, is called Simply Home, and has been developed by Reply. It is referred to the performance of multiple payments that are related to the purchasing of a property, possibly through mortgage. So in this case, when we buy the house, several payments needs to be performed to the agency, to the notary, to the seller, to the bank of the seller for a possible previous mortgage, etc. And this functionality, again, a split transaction functionality, make a single transaction. So or you pay all the beneficiary that deserve to be paid for the buying of the house, for the purchase of the house, or no payments are performed. So, and these use cases show especially the power of having a digital euro that is a liability of a central bank. So those four use cases are not the complete examples of what can be done thanks to a programmable digital euro, but I think they give a good high-level perspective of the several ways in which our experience of citizens can be changed thanks to the programmability of money. Here you can see the list of the banks that has cooperating with us and the partners that have supported. Another things I want to underline is that we started this project just before Christmas. We identified the 4 use cases in mid-January, and on mid-March, the 4 demos were completed. This is very interesting because one of the main benefits on a DLT-based infrastructure for a digital euro is the extreme smoothness and the extreme frictionless way of developing new use cases and replicating and developing other way of in which similar functionalities can be developed. I just want to leave you a final message. This comes from Peter Pan, because sometimes looking at a digital euro, we can be a little bit scared and we can ask, what if I fall? But the right answer is, what if you fly? So let's try to understand which kind of digital economy can expect us thanks to a programmable money. And Jonas, if you agree, I think we can switch to the question time.
Yeah, thank you very much. So this is really a very good ending of the story, and also of the presentation. Also got me thinking again. So first of all, thank you very much, Silvia and Rita, for this presentation and to share some insights into the Spunta project. I think it's really great that you focus on a practical approach and do not basically just do research analysis, but really also do this in practice. I think this is really impressive and really a very, very good step. Before we go into the Q&A, maybe to the audience, so if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. We also have received quite a few. We are very happy to discuss the next approximately 20 minutes, but if you have even more questions, then just put them in the chat and I will forward them to you, Silvia and Rita. So one question would basically be that, yeah, you said that the partner banks basically kind of use Spunta now for kind of their daily business, if you want. For me, it would be like to two-tiered question. The first question would be like, for which type of activity Spunta is used? So when is, for example, the centralized system used and when the decentralized ones? And the second question relating to this would be, do we then in the end not need a centralized system anymore? So I would be very interested in your vision on that.
So the Spunta process now is run only on a distributed ledger technology. So the bilateral accounts are reconciled through a shared ledger. Through a common ledger, so they don't use a centralized system anymore for reconciling the Italian bilateral account. They still use centralized services for reconcile those kind of accounts with foreign correspondent banks.
Okay, thank you very much. So basically, to add one question to this question, it's the case that the banks that really apply Spunta, they really only use Spunta, right? So they don't use an outside Spunta centralized ledger for some kind of reconciliation for inside the Italian banking reconciliation, right? Did I get this correct?
Okay, I'm not sure I've correctly understood. There are a lot of reconciliations that are performed in a bank, but if we are talking about the reconciliation of bilateral accounts, they are all performed through the DLT. But of course, there are banks basically manage ledgers, you know, so there are a lot of informations to be reconciled.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, this was exactly the question. Thank you very much. So let's turn to the audience. And the first question would be about digital euro and banks. Here, the question from Karim would be, because you said that a digital euro should not like make banks kind of redundant, right? But here the question would be, shouldn't exactly the digital euro do this and should reduce the needs for banks in the end?
I will put this question to first, both of you. And then maybe Silvia will complement. Yeah, of course. I mean, ideally, you just have the European Central Bank opening accounts to all firms and all citizens in the EU, or even from outside of the EU, and the central banks do everything. That's clearly a model, but that model would have quite serious consequences in terms of monetary policy, financial stability. I mean, basically, it would be coming back to a model that even economists have studied of totally narrow money with no credit function, no deposits. So that's an option. We understand that this would be a complete upheaval of our economic system, and we understand that the ECB is not going that way, doesn't intend to go that way, because of course there are consequences. So we do see the need of banks as intermediaries and limit the function of the central bank to what the central bank is doing today, or I mean, more or less. Of course, it can also decide to do a little bit more or a little bit less, as we have seen since the start of the life of the ECB. You may, of course, consider that also in the aftermath of the crisis, the functions of the ECB, of the euro system, has changed over time. So it may be possible to have a different set of instruments available to the central banks, but we understand from the report that was put under public consultation and from all the statements that are being made by officials of the euro system, that's not the way they want to go.
Yeah, thank you for this clarification, Rita, on this question. The next question comes from Valeria and basically asks, I think this also goes to Rita, why the end user needs to be aware of the payment instrument if it is the same currency.
Well, basically, because today we do understand anyone of us, not only, let's say, digitally advanced people, but anyone can understand the difference between a credit card and a banknote. Of course, it's the same currency, but it's not the same instrument. And again, there are consequences in mixing the two. And this is one of the issues that needs still to be clarified by the ECB. And this, of course, links with the possible role of banks as distributors, so technical providers for the distribution of digital euro, but also the sustainability of a business model for payment services in the future. Because, of course, and maybe I think that this is an aspect that will be touched later on. Of course, today a digital payment instrument can be more convenient, for example, for merchants which have no problem in managing banknotes and coins. And for this reason, they do accept to pay some fees on commercial bank money. If tomorrow a digital euro is just like accepting a credit card for a merchant, then of course something is should have a different sustainable equilibrium for the players involved in the transaction.
Thank you very much.
And can I add something a little bit more basic on this topic? Different payment systems have different characteristics. This is not even today. This is not always clear to every consumer. But if I give a banknote to another person and then I want back that banknote, I need to convince them to give me back my banknote. This is the same thing that would happen with the digital euro, but this is not the case with a credit card. I have a period of time to within a set of rule within if the transaction has some characteristic and I have all that is defined in the schema, let me say, I can reject a transaction. This will not be the case with the digital euro. So this is a difference that has a pro and cons that needs to be understood for each transaction.
Thank you. Yeah, and I really like also the differentiation you make, that basically every like means of payment or instrument is indeed different, and then every person should can consider what are the pros, what are the cons, and therefore the digital euro you envision, I mean, is something new in the end, right? So it really has a use case because it doesn't replicate we already have, right? Yeah. Great. So let's come to the next question by Barnabas, and it asks, how would you compare or relate the European Payment Initiative and the digital euro? So how do your banks actually think about these two initiatives in relation, if you want?
Yeah, again, well, basically, it's a little bit a logic development of what we were saying. EPI is intended as an initiative to provide a pan-European solution combining card payments and account-based instant payments for any possible current use cases, so online and in-shop purchases. It's an interesting initiative. It's an important one, and answers to a set of expectations that the EU authorities have set since some time. And that's also why both the European Commission and the European Central Bank have openly supported EPI. And even in the latest published retail payment strategy by the European Central Bank a week ago, there was a statement about this, the support of the ECB of EPI. So we believe that, again, the two could run in parallel if the digital euro has some characteristics. And that's also why we do believe that it should be DLT based and not just replicate with what we already have in the market. Again, we could even envisage that in the future, we could have an API solution, and in the same wallet, you would also have digital euro. So there might be ways of combining the two different experiences. Then, of course, we don't speak about investment and cost, which needs to be still seen.
Very interesting. Thank you very much, Rita. Then we have one question by Sharom. And again, if there are other questions, please post them in the chat. And here the question is more about support of a CBDC. So for a CBDC being free of charge, so no merchant commission, also no interchange, what would be the business model or incentive for banks and other payment actors to support it?
Well, I guess that digital euro would be the future of fiat money. So by law, it should have the same power that today's banknotes and coins have. So economic agents could not refuse, as this is the case today with the euro banknotes, could not refuse to accept digital euro. We could, and I was discussing that a little bit before, that of course the business model and the difference of paying one way or the other should also be clear in order for the market to devise the right business model. Of course, perhaps today is a little bit difficult to devise one, because we don't know the characteristics of the digital euro, but definitely this is an issue to be explored in depth. Why supporting it? Well, we could even think that considering the fact that banks would have possibly an even larger role in distributing digital euro than today have for cash, because cash can be distributed by non-banks. Then we could even think of completely different sustainable business models and the relationship between the central bank and the banks.
Thank you very much. Then we have another question by Kareem, and he asks, what added values and services do you believe should banks develop for a digital euro world? An interesting one.
Oh, this has been exactly the center and the focus of our experimentation project in the last months. I'm sure we have just started understanding where the how big the iceberg could be, but the first use cases we tried to develop and to understand was related to specific functionalities enabled by the DLT. I mean, the split transaction and the specific purpose money, we can say. So there are, and I think it is important when we talk about value added services to try focus on comprehensible real life of people. So we tried to understand something that has now burdensome and not so smooth in the experience of everyday life, such as, for example, the government bonuses. But something similar could be envisaged, for example, for a ticket restaurant or for other kind of money that are provided for specific purposes. So this is the great challenge that market actors has for in the next period, in the next years.
Great. So this was actually it from the question side from the audience. So again, thank you very, very much, Rita and Sylvia, for sharing your insights. I also really wish you all the best of luck with the project, also with the progresses. So I'm really impressed by your practical approach, and I think this will really be a very important initiative also for the ECB in the near and also the medium term future. So thanks for being with us today. Sorry again for these technical inconveniences. And yeah, maybe also one last word to the audience. We will host a few more events with the Digital Euro Association, so approximately every 4 to 6 weeks. So just stay tuned, maybe check out our newsletter, our homepage, and we will soon communicate our next events. So again, thank you very much, Rita and Sylvia, for being with us today. I hope you enjoyed it, and yeah, wish you a wonderful evening.
Yeah.
You too.
Thank you.
So
Thank
much.
you for the opportunity, and have a nice evening to all.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.